Welcome everyone to our second International Symposium of Social Haptic Communication. Uh, it's been hosted by our research group here at the Methodist University of São Paulo, coordinated by Professor Elaine Vilela. And we are now starting another afternoon of activities here. So we are going to begin with the table, the name, Interpretation Guide and Legislation, or Guide Interpretation and Legislation. Our keynote speaker today is Professor Lenildo Souza. She's specialized in Libras interpretation. Also the president of FEBRAPIUS, which is the Brazilian Federation of Sign Language Interpreters. We'll also count with Professor, which is a lawyer and specialized in international relations. So now I'm going to welcome you guys and tell you that we can begin right now. We can begin with Lenildo. Is it okay? Okay, so I'm going to ask Professor Lenildo and Mariana to speak for 20 minutes. Afterwards, we're going to open for some questions and make some mediation. Professor Lenildo, please, you can begin. Okay, hello, good afternoon, everyone. I'm very happy to be here with you, and we from FEBRAPIUS accepted to be in this moment, in this International Symposium of a very important and valuable subject. I feel privileged to be here. It's 2 days of a lot of learning and exchanges that will certainly contribute to everyone that is watching us presentially or virtually too, and important reflections about our field of work. It's a pleasure as the president of FEBRAPIUS to be here to participate in this moment alongside everyone here. I wrote some topics about legislation here, and I also thank Warley for the articulation and the technical work, all the interpreters and guide interpreters that are acting in this event, from oral languages or sign language too. So starting with our main subject, it's important that we recognize the importance, the historic importance, and the continuous fight that FEBRAPIUS been doing for regulating the profession here in our country. This person, this professional, before some of the laws here in Brazil, this professional wasn't showing up. But after our most recent way, the interpreter has been included in the current law that made some modification on the 2010 law. And we had a modification in 2023. That's a fundamental thing for us because we have the translator, the interpreter, and the guide interpreter. Translator, the interpreter, and guide interpreter. But having those professionals, it doesn't guarantee that everything will work out fine. We have the guide interpreter, and it is not just a communicational mediator. It's also responsible for promoting autonomy, mobility, and social participation for the deaf-blind person. It's very important for us to have registered by law, but we do need more things. In my perspective, as I spoke with Warley before, I'm going to focus on the guide, the new legislation that was signed in 2023. So a positive issue is that formally the guide interpreter by law, and I think that everyone knows, but there was some courses, some graduations that are focused on guide interpreting, like Ahimsa or Grupo Brasil. I work alongside Regiane and Fernando too, and we try to articulate with other representations. But when we assume now, we were trying to focus on the law, and we were able to talk more about this professional, the guide interpreter. And the guide interpreter is a professional that knows at least one of the ways of communication of the deaf-blind person. A possible critic of our analysis is that this definition is too broad. We must have a more detailed information about this, because know at least one kind of communication is something very broad to configure an adequate professional to work in this area. So we also have other kind of professionals that work alongside. And I remember that Alexandra Lins, that is also a guide interpreter, came to us and said, well, there are a lot of things that that we need to review, we need to change maybe. And since I'm not from this area, I was expecting to hear everyone that works with guide interpreting in an everyday basis. One important thing to reflect about is that the legislation puts some of prerequisites necessary so you can work. You might need to have Letras Libras, which is a specific graduation course here, or other kind of master or specialization courses. But we didn't have anything to attest the proficiency in any kind of communication. There is not a specific graduation for guide interpreting. We only have the graduation for Libras, which is Brazilian Sign Language. We might think that a technical course, which is like a minor, that have 2 years of formation only, maybe that wouldn't be enough. Then one of our critics is that a major, we still don't have it in Brazil. It may be necessary eventually, but the current legislation is the product of a lot of fights and mobilizations. We had a lot of teams working alongside the deaf community and everyone. But one of the critics that we have is that right now, having a major, it's distant. We don't have a lot of articulation right now enough to create a new kind of graduation. And we also need technical understanding, technical knowledge, so we can have enough knowledge to build a new course. Everything that involves this professional, we might need to have more guide interpreters here so we can start to graduate more. So we will listen to a lot of people that work in the area. Maybe in the future we can think about creating a new graduation course specific for guide interpreting, but I think what is possible now is to open some free courses or some minors, so that it can take care of everything. We can like make extension courses that are ministered inside the universities to talk about the guide interpreting. It's not something forgotten by the Federation. We really want to work with that. We want to take care of it. We want to talk to different federations that are specialized in this. We want to create bridges between them and the university to create workshops and minor courses. and free courses, but it's still hard to do that because we don't have a lot of people available. Other thing is the work journey. By law, it says that maximum it's 6 hours and switching with two professionals at least. But we know that this thinking about the guide interpretation is not, it's not 100% okay. We might need to give some to make some changes in that to attend perfectly the guide interpreting. That is because if an interpreter have some impairments cognitively speaking, the guide interpreter have even more of them because the modality, the tactile or haptic modality, they are even harder than the common interpretation or translating. Maybe in the first moment we were thinking about the interpreter, and we assured some of our give us some guarantees for them about time and switching with true professionals. But maybe for the guide interpreting, we might need to think about 3 guide interpreters, or we might need to reduce this time of 1 hour minimum for at least 2 interpreters. But to do that, we need to have the participation of this area with us. We need more and more partnerships so we can understand the need of what guide interpreters and deafblind people, their needs, so we can attend them. We realize that most of the work of this professional is invisible because its role, it's maybe unseen for most people. We are not used to see guide interpreters in our events. I work in INES, and we see different events that we can see interpreters. We are being seen right now. And sometimes what happens is that people or the companies want to pay for a common interpreter to act as a guide interpreter and don't want to pay enough for that. They think it's everything, it's the same thing. Like guide interpreting is one of the parts of the Libras interpreting, and it's not. So we still need to think about everything that is specific to the guide interpreting, and we need to put them in a place where there is more visibility for this professional. So we can think about looking for spots specifically for guide interpreting, and even for concourses here, for exams to work in federal institutions. We know that guide interpreting also involves proximity and physical contact. It's also an issue that we identified because we need to think about that ethically and have a different relation with the deafblind person and the guide interpreters. We have to pay attention to that and put that in our ethic code. We already have an ethical code, it's in our website, but we might need to give another look to this code and put some extra information for guide interpreting, because it's a different relation that we need to think about. Those are important things that we can't forget when we are talking about this, and including it in the law, it's one step. It's now a formal professional. The guide interpreter is a formal professional here in Brazil right now. There is a law that acknowledges its importance and its work ethic, but we still need to work more on that. I was at an event and there was a deafblind person participating, and the deaf blind person raised his hand and said, well, you need to think more about us, about the deaf-blind, and about the guide interpreters. And that's something that we are doing and we'll keep doing. So Faber Appeals will continue to work on that in order to guarantee all the rights that the deaf-blind and the guide interpreters have, like to have them, and to guarantee that they are being perfectly available for everyone. And we also have to think better about the different kinds of communication, like the identification of who is this process, what kinds of communication can be considered. And to do that, we need more and more contact with the HIMSA, with Grupo Brasil, with other association and the guide interpreters. So we need to have people to reach for, because sometimes we want to make a consultation and we don't know who to ask because we don't have a lot of guide interpreters alongside us. Regiane, I said something about her before, and she participated on a lot of, he did a lot of studies to talk about the health of the guide interpreters during the pandemic and ways to work alongside the community. Regiane is a very good partner of ours, but we still need more people to work with us and to help us think about what other policies we can fight to get published, to get available in our country. Since in the law there is a necessity of proficiency, to see how can we articulate so we can have exam or a different certification or a different thing that we have to ask people to have so they can work as guide interpreters. Think about a post-graduation, specialization, or other kind of course. Having an adequate curricular reference. Since we use a lot the table of reference of values to salary values, payment, maybe we can also review this table, see if it's enough for guide interpreting, thinking about ergonomy, the health of the guide interpreter. The law gives this 1 hour minimum or 1 hour maximum to act alone as an interpreter, but maybe as a guide interpreter, we might need to change that. We might need to say that we need every time, for the whole time, we need 2 guide interpreters, for instance. Also, we need to fight for concourses, exams for the public spaces, for guide interpreters inside Faber Appeals. We are reaching for people that work as interpreters and guide interpreters to see how we can create like a committee or a group, a commission that can talk about the health and the work of guide interpreters. And in our existence ethic code that is about to be updated, we also want to put a specific one chapter specific to the guide interpretation and detailing all the limits about the touch, but prioritizing the autonomy of the deafblind person. So in summary, I think that we in Faber Appeals think a lot about these aspects. I remember that I went to an event about Usher syndrome, and I had contact with a lot of people that we are in contact right now. And Faber Appeals is open to hear everyone, to articulate the best way possible so the result can be favorable for everyone. Faber Appeals is always available, reaching for actions that are more realistic and adequate for everyone, not only the hearing interpreters, but also the deaf interpreters, the guide interpreters, hearing and deaf. We're thinking about everyone. So thank you for the opportunity of being here to talk about Fair Appeals and all our actions since the alteration in 2023. We're happy to have a law here in Brazil for that, and we will keep open to the communication with you guys. Thank you.
So, Professor Leguido, thank you very much for this clarification. So now we're going to have Professor Mariana. She's also a partner in our project. So she's really welcome right now. Few notes. It's so technological that I'm a bit lost here. So please, Professor Mariana. Good afternoon, everybody. Our colleague Lenildo talked about this very important profession that is the guide interpreter. So as I'm in the field of law, I prefer to approach in terms of law. So I'm going to talk about the guide interpreter, but also from the point of view of the person who's helped by the guide interpreter and how we can include this in the process. I'm talking from Uni Evangelica, and we're happy to take part in this symposium. I'm sorry, I silenced my microphone mistakenly. So I start with our constitution, talking about the people with the deficiency, disability. We see that the constitution brings in some moment, but especially in the article number 7, it's going to talk about the prohibition of any discrimination in what refers to salary and the admission criteria of the worker who's got a disability. So how is this person who needs a guide interpreter going to have the help? And the article 23 that also talks about the common competence from the federal state, the state, and the city to take care of the health and the public assistance and protection of the ones who need the guide interpreter. So I agree with what Lenildo said. We have to remember that before our statute, we had the law that talked about the integration of the people with disability in our society. But this integration will just be complete if we have the guide interpreter. So I focus on person in the whole. labor market. People usually talk about the quotas according to the number of employees in the company. So any company with more than 200 employees, they have a percentage of many employees with disabilities. So we have here the rule of inclusion with the percentages. Now, is it really happening? Is it real? So this is one of the points we have to think about in the situation. Another law that I want to point out is the law of the people who can really work. So, uh, depending on the disability and its severity, uh, the person is going to receive benefit. So I decided to uh, approach this subject, bring chronologically how this benefit has really helped these people. The value of this benefit is of one minimum wage. So I brought this, but part of that is not uh, like it is according to the law nowadays. But I brought from a whole period uh, in the last year we paid over 6 billion in benefit. Now the benefit doesn't have an age limit as it is with retired people. Now, we observe that before the law we have nowadays, it was very different. The disability criteria was more related to performance, and we can see that the bill before the new law that now completes 10 years, it was a very negative bill. So they would see disability as invalid, and uh, they used to see the person with disability with a condition that should be cured, should be mended, treated. The person would have to be treated by the medicine. But now, according to the Civil Code of 2002, uh, that considered the absolutely uh, incapacitated for the people with disability or mental disability, we have all the way up to what we have nowadays, although we still have a lot to be worked on. So now I bring the evolution to what we have nowadays, according to what I do. As Professor Alessandra talked about me, I work with law and international law, so that's very dear to me. The International Convention about the people with disability and its protocol signed in New York, we see all the advances that came after 2009 in Brazil. Now we see the disabled person with an impediment of long-term of physical, mental, intellectual, sensorial nature, uh, with the interaction with several barriers that can obstruct its participation, its full participation in society. So in 2013, we get to the retirement benefit with a complementary law that makes it possible for a disabled person to work and have some items that can reduce the contribution period. So we have a serious, medium, and light items that now is a biocycle physical evaluation. So now we can say that the disabled person is not necessarily incapable of working. The person, after the evaluation, both medical and professional, can work. I could bring several laws that have been advancing in terms of the retirement of people with disability. So the Brazilian Law of Inclusion, the Institute of People with Disability, influenced by the international law. So we're gonna evaluate biopsychosocial the person to get to what we nowadays call a person with disability. So nowadays we have a positive and inclusive view based on human rights. It was the first law dealing with that, and we're going to try to include these people into the working force. So I bring here the number of people from 2024 in Brazil. I got this data from the Ministry of Human Rights and the Rights in Brazil. So we had 18,000, more than 80,000 people in Brazil. So now in May 2025, we had the data of the new census. So it's a little bit lower, so a little over 14,000% of Brazilian population, representing 7.3% of the whole Brazilian population. And I compared here, and as I know that you're at UMESP in São Paulo, I brought the data from São Paulo, and according to the region in Brazil, that is southeast, where São Paulo is, we have here 6.8 for southeast region. We have more women than men that are disabled. So I bring here the kinds of deficiencies. So we can see here that the site represents almost 0.5%, all the percentage of people. It reinforces the view that we need to draw. For social in government, 545,000 workers for the market. So I am the leader of several companies.
So we know that all of that happens because of a lack of a real understanding of accessibility and inclusion. And that's when we get to this graphics here, all these charts. This is data from people with disability that are employed, and that is very curious because more women with disabilities, but employed we have more men. 63% of all population are women with disability, but about 50% are men, or 60% are men, and with not enough information. They have only the high school, the complete high school. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm beginning with, yeah, most of them have complete high school. And when we get to superior education, post-graduation, master, PhD, that's when it changes a little bit because we have more women with superior education than men. And here are some news that worries us. There are some information that came from papers. Almost 70% of people with disability in Brazil don't concluded the fundamental, the middle school, and only 5% finished college. There's also the number of people that don't know how to read and write is 4 times higher between people with disability in Brazil. The inclusion is still demands care, and people with different kinds of disability have even worse scenario than those that we are talking about here. Now I'm going to show our worries. The percentage of effective participation in people. Uh, I showed before that the number of people with disability with 60 years or more is higher because of the age, because disability is not just something that happens when you're born. It can be acquired when you get older. So we observe that people with disability is just 29.2% against 66.5 of people without disability, which is people in the work, people working in the society. And sometimes people understand that people with disability are like a swinging door. We hire them, but we can't maintain them in the work market. With all those information, and that's something that impact everyone as a guide interpreter, and that's why we think about the revolving door, is because we use this metaphor because sometimes we just get new people and new people coming and going, and they don't stay inside. And the guide interpreting works alongside those people. We have some challenges that we can see also in our Brazilian law of inclusion. Says that I'm sorry, she's reading a little bit too fast and I'm not being able to accompany, but I'm going to read just the part that is highlighted. Is to provide resources of assistive technology and reasonable adaptation in the work environment. This article is there in our law about people with disability. That shows the importance of the guide interpreter, the assistive technology, and other situations to the real inclusion. And that's when we observe, I'm very optimistic, and I really hope that we won't lose our faith and hope that this situation will get better eventually. And that's good because our law is not just punitive, it's inductive. It looks forward to changing behaviors and changing realities. And the tools that we have, we're observing today, thinking about the use of technology and artificial intelligence, that is allowing all those information to include in a better way those products, those equipments that uh, are in the law to all the technologies and situations that can turn viable the inclusion of the people with disability in the work market. So I thank you guys. I hope to uh, I hope that I was able to talk about everything in the time span that it was given to me. Thank you guys. Thank you for an invitation, and I send you a hug from Uni Evangelica. We are working alongside this faith and accessibility and education, and that's something real special for us, not only in our faith but also in the inclusion of this person in the work market. Professor Mariana, you are precise. You use your time perfectly. So thank you, both you guys. It's really rare to see that because you were impeccable in your time. Thank you very much. And right now we want to open for questions. If you guys have any, it's a super important thing, a very important subject. Here in the university, I work a little bit about public policies, and that's what we also discuss is the question of the abyss that we have when we think about what it is in the law and what happens, what really happens, so we can guarantee the inclusion and guarantee that it can really transform into realities. So now we're open to question. Do you have any? So I have a question for Leonardo. We know the reality. We know that today, we know everything that happens in this century, especially in the educational area, because in here in this educational area, we have it's a whole life before we get to college. It's a continuum. So, for instance, in 2023-ish, I think, um, it was approved the law, the interpreter law, that it's mandatory to have interpreter in the high schools and technical schools. It didn't have like an evaluating bench or advisors or anything, because prior to this law in 1942, I guess, there was one specific law that turned mandatory to have uh, evaluating bench. and then it become in the Libras technical course. I'm sorry to talk about that because we're all very happy, but it was a very unqualified Libras for the kids, the teenagers. Most 90% of the hearing families don't use Libras at home. 90% of everyone inside the school need to have this contact with the deaf people to have this, and the interpreters are not qualified to that too. So it's sad. It's a sad scenario, and the deaf community doesn't like that. So it's important for you to talk about the guide interpreter and the practice to get this proficiency. The deaf blind, for instance, it doesn't see, doesn't hear. It just feel, only have the sensory skills. So I think there are a lot of flaws in this law. But now I have a question for Mariana. Well, thinking about people with disability in the work market is super interesting to think about that. And it's easy to get this data, but the reality, the contact, the concrete, and all these things about the paycheck of people with disability, those things are really uh, something really big to think about. Oh, it's a fixed paycheck, because usually the hearing people have like a career plan, but people with disability, they have a fixed paycheck. They don't get promoted, for instance. And this is something really hard to think about, the salary biases. So it's interesting to think about the communication that most of the times happen through the cell phone with the supervisor and all the and everything. The supervisor needs to be deaf, and they use the cell phone because they don't know sign language. How does this communication happen? There are a lot of stories that unfortunately are not pretty as it is being shown. So I loved your presentation, but I wanted to talk about that, the empathy, the understanding, and but especially to think what is behind everything, to get more in depth of everything. Oh, just to talk, I'm deaf. That's my name sign, and I live with professor of the area in the area and other people, but there are a lot of stories that I could tell, but the time doesn't allow me. Yes, the reality is really sad, but it's also because they have these issues that and this discourse that says that they are enabled, they really are disabled, that they don't have the capacity of go ahead. So that's the importance of the public policies and the importance of events like this that discuss the the role of people with disabilities in our society. They are not invisible, they are not incapable of. They have to be seen, and they have a place. They belong here. But well, Professor Lenudo and then Professor Mariana. Okay, so trying to answer. Uh, the decree talked about the proficiency exam that was known as Pralibras, but it had a validity time. It's up to 2015, like an expiring date. This exam already proved that it was more like a linguistic competence analysis and not like an analysis of translator competency. And that usually went through the interpretation way and not the translation way. And the guide interpreter, I don't remember about having a specific exam for guide interpreters. I know that there was one for translation because I work at the INES institution and we had two deaf that work as translators there. So they work especially in translation and the mirrored interpretation. But the decree worked from 2015, and after that, just to tell you some spoilers, we have a law project. We already have a technical note to say about the importance of having a practical exam with FENACE, which is a law project. And we know that it's important to have an analysis, but we always talk about this, and we have some information about this in our website to say that this exam doesn't substitute, it's not a substitute to the structured formation with all the theoretical knowledge and laboratory practices and internships that are part of the major graduation. In this case, I'm talking about that because the law had different variation and the result is what we have now. So it's not really clear in the law which was which institution was the responsible for the evaluation bench and evaluation group commission, and to understand that this is a different thing. It's not a translator. The guide interpreter is not a translator, for instance. They work especially with guiding and interpretation. So that's also one more layer of everything we have to think about when we talk about guide interpreter. We've been working with FENACE, and we want to present some ideas to the Ministry of Education. And we have different authors and scientists to talk about this. You talked about the families that don't learn Libras. Yeah, that's other thing. And what happened is that most of the deaf kids, they have their contact initially in the school, the deaf school. So we've been talking with FENACE and other institutions that, especially in the first years of education, the kindergarten and the first years in the middle school, it's important for them to have contact with a deaf instructor or a deaf teacher, because an interpreter is not a teacher. His formation is to be a professional to mediate the communication. To be a Libras teacher, you have to make a teaching course. And what happens usually is we see that in some parts of the capital cities, it's easier to see some adaptations, but in the countryside, it's hard because most of the times the interpreter is the only point of contact that the deaf kid have with the language. An interpreter ends up absorbing different roles that are not proper to them. So we understand, yes, that one of the things we hear at Febrapius, and who knows me knows about that, I don't work with the idea pen, I work with the concrete and the reality. How does we deal with that? How can we change that? That's the way we've been working on Febrapius, to understand better of the nuances and the reality. And that's why we always articulate everything inside Febrapius and other kinds of representative institutions, organizations, so that we can have qualified, competent professionals and with the correct profiles to act in each necessary area. I don't know if I answered your question or if there was anything else, but that's it. Mariana?
So let's go. In relation to what she put for me, I think this reality is really sad. We have to see that a change in 10 years, that is when we had the Institute for disabled people, uh, is a person that is not invalid, but a person that can work. I I worked for 10 years with the reality of companies saying, why do I have to deal with this quota? The companies would look at this person not as a capable person. So uh, that's one of the reasons why they wouldn't have a career progression. Um, but after this law, we have this change of view. So uh, I can see now the people talking in Brazilian Sign Language, and I think it's wonderful. I didn't have a chance to learn the Brazilian Sign Language. So, how many people in a company had the access to Brazilian Sign Language? How many of the people working with people with disability had the opportunity to learn Brazilian Sign Language? How many schools in Brazil teach that to their students? So it, it's a sad reality, but I see that we are still advanced. We have advanced a lot in these last 10 years. So I'm a very optimistic person. So I hope that in 10 years we can look back and say how these last 20 years were. This inclusion involves the change of mindset. I know that the law is beautiful, but the reality is still far from what the law puts in society. So I know that it would be a very different reality for the people with disability. Now, another question, please. Oh, it's difficult. I don't know which side to look at. Good afternoon. My name is Vania. I'm a translator, interpreter, but I'm also a guide interpreter. I'd like to thank you both for your talk. I'd like to say that the law is really important because it will regulate the profession. But the law um, makes official something that already happens. So I think the law doesn't really bring anything new. It just socialize what's already happening in society. Now, I see in federal appeals a partner related to new laws, but also in terms of guidance. So I'd like to ask Lenildo if there's any possibility of federal appeals creating and organizing this technical notes norms for us to pledge for uh, pledge the companies, for example, based on the law, ask for working conditions. Now, um, just like the law now mentions the number of hours, everything, even if it's not in a specific law, I think that federal appeals could help in this process, looking for people to talk about that, and the universities also talking about um, guide interpreting and other alternatives and techniques. So I think federal appeals could bring that, bring a technical document about the guide interpreter, the same way they do the translation and interpretation. So I'd like to put in Febrapil's agenda, if it's not present, uh, norms and guidance in term for the guide interpreters. So according to the law, Tania, we have to find a decree that will regulate the law. So at the moment, we don't have that. Mm, We got emails saying that the course of Brazilian Sign language and literature courses don't make you a professional. So we have to uh, we have been trying to deal with several fronts. Your idea is really welcome, and you're already invited to be part of our work to help us with that and work with research for us to really work on your idea. Yes, these ideas are really welcome. They're very important, and um, this cooperation may bring ways to make it possible. Same way we deal with the laws about the minimum payment, and there are several aspects in the law that are still obscure, and we try to articulate with the government. But sometimes the answers takes very long, and when the answer comes, it's not dealing with what we asked. So yes, we may think of actions that might be more practical and to issue a norm about that. So thank you very much about your question. Okay, thanks. We know that the approval of a law takes a long time. Same way as a decree. The regulation is from 2017, if I'm not mistaken. The first law is about 2017. So that's about 7 years. So, oh, well, to be honest, it was stopped. We know that the instructions for the way to work is something emergential. So we think that Febrapios can try to find a way to give this guidance, right? So I hope something very interesting maybe should soon for everybody that is taking part here. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'd like to point the importance of what Professor Marina said and the way that university work show us work with the subject. We always mention here that we like research that will help the social demands, right? So I think um, we are also very thankful that we have this group here at our university that deals with haptic social communication, inclusion, and um, it, it's great that we can work in a way that will come society be put into practice. So I'd like to thank for your collaboration, but also to Lenildo, right, for taking part in this panel. And um, I'm glad to have you here, and thank you very much. We're going to have another panel at 3:10. Thank you very much.